Hey y'all, and welcome to a Holy Rust Revival. Gonna spend a little time on the Mustang this weekend. Kind of dropped the ball lately with other projects that have been going on and stuff that needs to be done around the farm. And if you've been watching, I tore up a winch here a while back and tore up a John Deere tractor, and it's just been a lot of fun around the farm here lately. Speaking of fun, it's probably a good thing you can only see me and not smell me at the moment. You might see over my shoulder back here a white deep freeze. Last weekend I was here, I smelled a little something. I thought it was just a mouse that I had caught in a mouse trap or something out here in the shop. Well, the freezer went out and I spent the afternoon cleaning that thing out. Oh my goodness. Oh, I don't even want to relive the moment. And again, I've got to go take a shower now because it's just terrible. I can't get that smell out of my nostrils. So that's been a fun afternoon. But let me give you an update of where we are on the Mustang. I've been procrastinating, okay? I've been scratching my head about what to do. I shot an episode a while back of taking this cowl out of the Mustang. There's a lot of rust here. That lip is completely gone. The lip is completely gone on the firewall, and the more I think about it, the more I do not want to remove the firewall, because really the stability of the car is tied in that firewall. And as well as right here, this would be easier to replace. I guess you would call this maybe a kick panel. And I have replaced those before, and it's not hard, but you do have to separate it from the firewall, and it's a lot of work, which it's pretty solid, except for up here at the top. So I think I'm gonna make a lip. I'm just gonna recreate a lip up here, weld it in really solid. It might very well be better than it was when it came from the factory. So I'm gonna play around with that a little bit, but I've been procrastinating by taking the whole front end apart. And I'm not gonna shoot videos on how to deinstall and install a front end on a 67 Mustang, because there are plenty of videos out there. However, I will show you one thing I'm doing. I'm working on some rust down here in the frame rail, and I'm gonna bring you in just a minute so that you can see what I'm doing down there. I figured that might be more of an interest to you because there's other videos that you can see where we reinstall all this. But there's a system to my madness. I need to get the front end all back together so that I can move the car, so that I can get that deep freeze out. And I feel like probably a mouse or something has gotten in there and chewed a wire up, and the compressor's not working anymore. So I've got to be able to get it out to work on it, and I can't do that with this car in the way. So that's a little bit of motivation behind why I am working on the Mustang this weekend. So let me pause the camera for a minute and bring you in here and show you what I'm doing under here. I'll show you this little project. I'm probably going to do this and go to bed tonight, because you know what? It is 10 o'clock at night in Mississippi, late August, and you know it's still 86 degrees right now. It is hot. I turned the fans off for just a minute, but I can't let them off for long because I'll just start pouring wet with sweat again. So anyway, let's get hot for a minute. Let me fix this frame rail. And throughout this weekend, as I work on this cowl, I'm going to bring you in and show you some things that I do there. Hopefully that's going to work. Let's cross our fingers. Okay, y'all, this is the worst part of the frame rail on the whole car. The front tire is basically right here where my hand is, and it kicks up all kind of, road debris and whatnot. So this is a pretty exposed piece of the frame rail. So I have already been cutting out some with my cutoff wheel, and I'm going to cut this all the way down to here. I may even saw this lip off right here, and I'm going to come back with a flat piece of metal. I'm going to overlap this right here all the way down, put a nice weld bead on that metal here, then another nice weld bead up here on top. So this will fix that up, what I'm about to do. And I'm going to tie it into this toe box right here, or I'm sorry, that's called a torque box. Not toe box, torque box. This is what provides rigidity to the frame rail. In this car, I actually did not have one on the passenger side in 1967, but I went on ahead and put one in and welded it all around, welded it to the frame rail down here. So we're solid all the way through here, except for this right here. And this ultimately really is the only bad place. The other side is not in bad shape at all. Now you see rust in the floor pan right there, but all of that is going to be replaced. But the frame rail itself is in excellent shape on the other side, so I'm not going to have to do a thing over there other than clean up, treat the rust, that sort of thing. So let me put the camera down a minute and work on this nice looking Swiss cheese right here and get this on out of our way, because if I get this out of the way and fix this, I can begin to put all my new suspension components in here for the suspension and get it back together. All right, y'all, be back in a minute. Okay, we've made a little progress on our frame rail. As you can see, I've cut out a piece of metal. Let me see if you can see it better that way. And I'm in the process of welding it in and kind of bending it along as I go. It's got two different curvatures in it. It's got a curve here, and then it's got a curve coming back this direction. So I'm welding from the top and then coming on down and connecting it in and using my jack for support. Now it looks like a big gap right here, but don't get scared. Don't get upset. But there was a little more rust here in this frame rail than I anticipated. You can see it was flush here, but we got a little sideways down below. That's okay. We're going to cut out a piece to fit this contour to get into good metal up here and join into metal down there. It's not a biggie. You know, when you're working on a budget, you just have to improvise as you go. So it's 11 o'clock now, and it's still 80 degrees in this shop, and I'm hot and I'm ready to get this done so I can go lay down in some air conditioning. All right, let me keep working. I'll bring you on back in a second. Hey y'all, it's midnight, still in the high 80s in Mississippi, midnight, and I'm hot. I'm drenched wet with sweat. Let me show you something. Let me show you how hot it is in Mississippi. Let me turn this camera around. I was just working right along. That tire looks normal, doesn't it? Well, let me take a little peek-see right there. It is so hot that tires are letting go in Mississippi. In the shade. Anyway, it was pretty dry rotted. It probably let go because of the air, but I'm sure the temperature had something to do with it. Things get a little looser when it gets hotter. Okay, so let me show you while the old feller's ready to go to bed. It's kind of sort of finished this frame rail project. So it looks better. Let me get you down here so you can see. Would you say that that looks a little bit better than the way that it did before? So basically took that whole section out right here and welded in this whole piece to replace all that rusty Swiss cheese. Is it perfect? No, there's a weld up here. You can see a weld down here and all across the top. Would it pass inspection if it were one of those highfalutin Mustang shows? Probably not. Is it stronger than it was 2 hours ago? Absolutely yes. Is it stronger than when it came from the factory? I would have to say so. This is a much heavier gauge steel than what was on there originally. And I'm telling you, it's welded solid all the way up the frame rail on this side up here as well. And down here really well. So I'm happy with that. So what that's going to enable me to do now is go ahead and start putting my suspension on. just too tired to do it tonight. We're going to start putting suspension on. I've already put the upper A-arm on, and we did what's called a Shelby drop. I say we, heck, I'm doing this by myself. Braden helps me every now and then. But if you'll look inside, I lowered the mounting holes for the upper control arm about an inch down. And there's actually a template I use to locate those holes. But what that does, it makes the geometry better on that upper A-arm. When you're turning and cornering, it allows your tire to stay, you know, when your tire rotates up and down, it allows your tire to basically stay flat on the ground. Otherwise, in the other geometry, it would kick up on its side just a little bit. So that little modification just helps with cornering. And when you're drooping down on one side. Okay, y'all, I can't hardly even talk. I'm gonna go to bed. This is gonna be a lot of tomfoolery right around in here. There's just a ton of stuff that's got to be fixed. Oh, that's bad. All of that is bad. But you know, the good thing with working with metal, you can put it back. You just have to be patient, but you can put it back. All right, good night, y'all. We'll continue through the weekend on this series. Hey, good morning, y'all. Had a good night's sleep last night. Got cooled off, but got hot again this morning. It's a little overcast this morning, and the sun is not beating down on the shop too terribly bad, but it's still hot none the least here in Mississippi. So, got up early this morning and did a lot of work on the suspension. As you can see, I've got the spindle back on, rebuilt the strut arm bushings, put the lower control arm in, rebuilt those bushings, all new ball joints, all that kind of stuff. And you might be saying, well, Rob, why is all this looking so nasty? Well, this is just temporary. These old drum brakes are going to come off, and I'm going to put power brakes as well as disc brakes on the front. So all this is to get this back on there, to get the wheel back on so I can move the car, so I can clean my deep freeze out. So anyway, this is temporary, but I wanted to show you something. Last night I mentioned the lowering of the upper control arm about an inch of what's called the Shelby drop. And I've got a little visual I want to show you, and I'm going to back the camera up so you can see just a little bit better. Ultimately, you want this surface to be level to the ground in any droop of the tire, so that you can have great contact of the bottom of the tire on the ground. So the reason for that Shelby drop, to drop that upper lower control arm, is to create a better angle on this upper control arm so that you can keep this surface as level as possible throughout the droop of your suspension, if that makes sense. So I've got a magnetic level attached to the surface of this drum, and I'm gonna back the camera up so you can look at this little ball level, or this little bubble in the level rather, and see how level this suspension is through the droop. So let me get you on in here. Okay, so this is about as far drooped down as the suspension can go. And you can see the little bubble is on one side of the line right there. It's not perfectly in the center. So what we hope as this goes up, it's going to go more towards center, and probably when it goes up all the way, the bubble may go the other direction. You have to think of this whole droop in this suspension as operating on the plane of a circle. And the reason for dropping that is you create, I guess, a bigger rotation. Since it's not parallel to the bottom trailing arm, what I'm trying to say is it almost kind of pushes when the bottom comes up, the top pushes out just a little bit. And watch this bubble right here, and notice that when I start to jack up on the suspension, the bubble's actually going to go the other direction. So pay careful attention right here to this bubble. Okay, that's probably about ride height right there. And I have not even worked on lining up this suspension, but as you can see, it's pretty doggone close for the tire to be perfectly level at ride height. I've got to, when I get everything put in, I'll have the front end lined up to be a whole lot better. But let's go on up further. As you can see, even through the actual compression of the spring and the suspension going up, the bubble is pretty much near staying in the center. And that's what you want when you're hard cornering in your car and one side goes up and the other side goes down. You want that bubble to stay as near to the center as possible. If it had not been for that Shelby drop, that bubble would be much more extremely moving one way or the other. So I thought that might give you a little bit of a visual of kind of sort of how that suspension works. And I tell you, that bubble is, it doesn't stay far from the center at all levels of the suspension. And that's exactly what you want for a very good maneuvering car, either on the street or if you're taking some hard corners on a racetrack or something like that. You want that suspension to keep that tire in contact on the ground as much as possible, because that's safe. It's just safe. If your whole tire is flat at all times, you get more traction and it's just much safer for you. Okay, y'all, I hope you can hear me. I have all the fans on. The oven is starting to cook outside. But anyway, I wanted you to see the complete suspension. Had to compress that spring in order to get it in the slot and make it line up on the top and the bottom. There are plenty of videos out there where you can see that. But I just wanted you to see the complete suspension. Now, the only thing that's lacking is the sway bar. It bolts in this vicinity, and then excuse me, bolts in that hole on the bottom control arm. But anyway, I bought the wrong bushing, so I can't put that in at the moment. So I just wanted you to see the complete spring in the hole before I put the shock tower bracket on there, which also has the bump stop bushing on it. So it's very important that this go back. But you just get a better shot of the complete suspension without that on. All right, guys and gals, suspension is done on this side, completely done. New Eaton spring. I didn't want to take any chances on having a bad spring that's been in there for 50 years. So new spring, new control arm, bushings, lower control arm, all of the dampening devices in here to keep the creaks and cracks and all that kind of stuff out. So the only thing I don't have, is you probably noticed, the shock is not inside that spring. I've got those on order, and they slip down through the top, bolt into the bracket on the bottom, and give us a lot of shockulating. So this side is done. Thought you might like to see that. This side, on the other hand, is not done. So this is where I am. I had an idea that I might get to this weekend, but that's not going to happen. This suspension and all this is going to take all of my time. And over there, you remember I did some welding. That's what kind of took a lot of my time over there. The problem over here is I need to take all this power steering mess out while I have access to do it. It'll just be a lot easier now. Let me explain something about this old power steering system. It was a great system in its day, but technology has far advanced what came out in this car. Now, if you can see that cylinder right there, that is a hydraulic cylinder. It was kind of a retrofit to put power steering on this car, and it was a pretty cool car to have power steering on it. That was a nice luxury back in the day, but it was a bit of an afterthought. That's a manual steering gearbox that the pitman arm goes to a valve, and when you start to put pressure on that valve either way, left or right, it sends fluid to this cylinder to assist in the steering process. The problem with this system is it leaks, and it leaks terribly. There are two hoses right here. There's a cylinder that will get leaks inside of here, Leaks back here, leaks all around that valve. It's just too much potential for leakage. Let me give you another view of it. Maybe it'll make a little more sense to you. There's the valve itself. Sticks way out there. See that? And the pitman arm is right here. And like I said, when you put pressure either way on that pitman arm, it sends fluid through this valve to that cylinder to give you power steering. Well, needless to say, the technology has gotten a lot better since that time. And what I've ordered, and I have in stock, whew, boy, the older you get, the harder it is to get off the floor. I've got to get a lift in my shop one of these days, you know? But anyway, look at here. Look in the goodie box. This is a Borgenson power steering sector. That's modern technology. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that beautiful? So anyway, the power steering is included in the gearbox itself. This is how modern cars, or more modern cars rather, have a power steering setup. So I'm going to convert this old Mustang to a more modern power steering system. And this kit came with all the hoses. It came with a rag joint. And by the way, this is very important on this Mustang. Let me show you something. That steering column right there is solid all the way to that box. There is no joint in that. There's no breakaway in this. So if you have a front end collision, let's just say you have a front end collision right here, all the power or the ripple of the collision goes through this frame rail, which this gearbox is attached to that frame rail, and that solid steering shaft goes all the way up to where you're sitting in your chest. There's a solid rod right there. So think about this for just a second. That pressure is going right to your face and to your chest up through that steering column and that steering wheel. That's not good, y'all. Well, what this is, number one, it isolates a lot of vibration from the car, and it's got a rubber joint in here. It's I don't know if you can see it very well, but the new steering shaft, and by the way, there's a new steering shaft too. I'm going to have to take the old shaft out of the column and replace it with this steering shaft because it's a little bit shorter in order to put this breakaway rag joint in that column. So now that's much safer. If we have a front end collision, this will break and not send all of that pressure up through that steering column to your face. And it might make my old ugly face stay at least as ugly as it is now and not get any worse. Also with the kit came a power steering pump. I've already kind of mated it to the engine to make sure that the pulley's lined up, and as you can see, they do. Let me get it right there, right there. All right, the belt pulley lines up. So this is a Saginaw pump. This is a more modern style. Matter of fact, GM vehicles use this more, so I know it's a little heresy to have a little GM Saginaw pump in a Ford Mustang, but honestly, this is just a much better part. Many of you may remember the old power steering pump that came in Fords, and they were rather effective, but they were noisy. You can already see that this one is, you can hear it making noise just sitting here on the bench. It's noisy, it doesn't pump well, it leaks bad. I just didn't want to fool with that at all in this car. So that, bye-bye to that Ford pump, and hello, GM Saginaw. Yes, yes. Now, it might look like it's sticking way out from the engine, and I did. I put it in the arrangement in which if a car had air conditioning, it would be sticking further out. Compressor is going to fit right here one day. And yes, I am going to put air conditioning in this car. It's just too hot in Mississippi not to have air conditioning. You just can't survive down here. I mean, I'm a living proof of that today. So, here we go, little update. Let me get busy, even though the shop is as hot as it can be. Let me get on the floor and waller around. That's what we say in Mississippi, waller. And make the other side look like that right there. So anyway, I'm working from the front all the way back. And once I get all of this in, I'm not going to have any excuse not to get in there. But I know I told y'all at the beginning of the video we may work on this weekend. I just don't simply think I'm going to get to that. But anyway, we're getting stuff done. Okay. It's probably a good thing you haven't been with me for the past hour and a half getting all of this out of the car. This is the whole power steering system set up out of that 67 Mustang. And when something's been in there for 50 years, it's just not easy to get out. But I had to show you this. Now you can probably get a better understanding about how much can actually go wrong with this old Mustang power steering system. We're talking a cylinder that can leak here. It can leak back here. These hoses, there's two hoses that run from that to the valve that can break and also leak. There's a hose that runs to the pump, a return hose that comes from the pump. There's seals here, there's a seal here, there's a seal here, and there's at least 10 different places that this whole setup can leak, and hoses that can bust. 4 different hoses that could go kaplooey on you. So that Rube Goldberg looking device sitting on the floor is no longer in the Mustang. Now, this is going to sound completely strange. Okay, let me turn the camera around. This is strange, but I have just converted a power steering Mustang to a manual steering Mustang so that I can convert it to a power steering Mustang. I know that doesn't make sense at all, but let me show you what I've done to the car itself to convert it back to manual. So all of that stuff I took out was replaced by that joint right there. So this drag link, or tie rod, whatever you want to call it, is still a power steering tie rod. And the only way you'll ever know is there's a hole right there where that cylinder used to go through. Otherwise, this car is completely a manual steering car. That is a factory original manual steering box that attached all of that apparatus that we just looked at to make this car power steering. So in order to put power steering back on this car in that setup that I showed you earlier, you've got to convert it back to manual. So guys, when you're out there looking for an old Mustang, 67 specifically, or the 65s and 66s, it's almost better that you get a manual car to start with. That joint right there cost about 80 bucks. So in order to convert it to manual, I had to spend 80 bucks on that, whereas if you already had a manual car, you would not have to have that joint. So it just kind of makes sense to, and more attractive actually, to find a manual steering car if you want to put a very good power steering system in it. Let me give you a shot of the joint on the other side. You remember all that mess that used to be right there? Well, look how clean it looks now. And that joint is connected to the pitman arm on the steering box. So, we have converted from power steering to manual to convert back to power steering. I know it doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of stuff that I do that doesn't make sense. Like working on an old car and sweating my tail off. Does that make a lot of sense? Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. All right, I'm gonna spend about another hour getting all this suspension put back on, get the tire put back on, and the car back on the ground, and that's gonna be our goal for the day. Just not gonna get to that. I'm too tired, I'm too hot, but I've accomplished my goal of getting this suspension on so that I can get this stinky freezer out of here and get it cleaned up. Man, it is attracting flies, and it stinks. Not only am I hot, but it smells terrible in here. Oh, what a wonderful day. And it is. Every day that God gives us is a wonderful day. All right, I'll bring you back in a minute and show you the final product. Okay, y'all. We're wrapping the weekend up. I think I kind of have a different idea in mind for these videos in the future. Instead of trying to
get one thing accomplished, we're just going to document what a weekend warrior does on the weekend. Because I can set off in my mind to get something accomplished, and I get diverted by something breaking, this and that, or something else coming up that it's no telling what I'll get done in a weekend, or I may get twice as much done or half as much. I don't know. Anyway, I got to thinking I almost let an episode get by without having a dad joke for you. Hey, did y'all hear about the guy that fell in the upholstery machine this past week? Don't worry about him. He's fully recovered. I'm sorry, I had to squeeze that in. But let me switch the camera around and give you the final result of what all we've gotten done this weekend. All right, there she is. So, you don't remember, my ultimate goal is to work from the front of the car back. And I'm making my progress that way. Ultimately, I want to get from the firewall up done so that I can get the engine and the transmission put in and get that out of my shop floor, because quite frankly I'm tired of stepping over those things, just taking up space. So if I can get it set down in there, I can get it out of the way and be able to cover it up real good, while I'm working on the car. So brand new springs, Eaton springs, all new bushings, upper and lower control arms, ball joints, rust fixed in the frame rail, new strut arm bushings underneath, and the other side is complete as well. I couldn't be any happier about what we've gotten done this weekend, and I really appreciate you following along and checking it out. Now, I have named this area the Pit of Despair. That's what we're going to call it, the Pit of Despair. Y'all, I continue to procrastinate, but I have all the parts in stock to do it. I've even got the firewall mat and the heater box, and I think I'm going to build the firewall and everything while I've got the top off. I don't know. That's something I'm thinking about. But anyway, look, God bless y'all. Thank you for watching, and it's Saturday afternoon. Find you a church tomorrow. Go to church. Get in with a group of believers and worship the good Lord tomorrow, and the rest, and just have you a good week next week. All right? Well, look, stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in to Holy Rust Revival. We'll be back with more content later. And I think the next thing we're going to tackle is that Pit of Despair. All right, God bless y'all. Bye-bye.